Welcome to the debate. Today, we are taking a sledgehammer to a very popular, very persistent narrative in the business world. And that's the idea that the digital disruptor, Amazon, is inevitably going to dismantle the brick-and-mortar incumbent, Walmart. I mean, if you look at the stock charts over the last decade or just read the headlines, it's easy to think that's the story. You know, the old guard dying at the hands of the new digital AI-driven future. But if you actually look at the structural economics, the plumbing of how these companies work, the reality is much, much stubborn.
It certainly is. And frankly, the death of retail narrative is, well, it's just lazy analysis. We aren't looking at a simple case of old retail versus new retail. What we're looking at is a clash between two fundamentally different economic models. This isn't just about who sells more toothpaste or cheap TVs. It's a battle between, really, cost architecture and ecosystem value.
Exactly. And that brings us to the central question we're debating today. Why hasn't Amazon beaten Walmart? Now, my argument is going to be that Amazon isn't even trying to beat Walmart at its own game. I think Amazon's model is superior because it redefines the nature of commerce itself. They've shifted from pure retail to a diversified platform where retail is really just a demand engine supported by these massive high-margin ecosystems like Amazon Web Services and advertising.
I see where you're going, but I come at it from a completely different angle. I'm going to argue that the immutable physics of retail economics still favor Walmart. You can't innovate your way out of the cost of moving physical goods. Walmart's structural moat, which is built on inbound logistics and physical proximity, it creates an efficiency advantage that Amazon simply cannot replicate, no matter how many servers they have in the cloud.
Well, let's get into it. I'll start by laying out my position on Amazon's structural superiority. When we read Amazon's 10K filings, the company does not conceptualize itself primarily as a retailer, and that is a critical distinction. Amazon is a technology platform. It spans e-commerce, yes, but also logistics infrastructure, digital advertising, subscription ecosystems, and of course cloud computing.
But let's be clear for the listeners. They sell goods. To the average person, Amazon is a store. If I buy a pair of shoes, that's retail.
They do sell goods, of course, but in the Amazon model, retail functions as an entry portal. It's a demand engine that feeds a broader monetization ecosystem. Think of it as a flywheel. You buy the goods, which locks you into Prime. Prime keeps you in the ecosystem where you watch content, you see ads, you generate data, and over time, high-margin businesses like AWS, which powers a huge chunk of the internet, and your booming digital advertising arm have become the financial backbone of the firm. This diversification lets Amazon operate retail at razor-thin margins because the profit is coming from the cloud. So they're optimizing for convenience, selection, and speed. They are capturing the future architecture of commerce and what we call digital lifetime value. They just aren't vulnerable to the thin margins of selling goods in the same way a traditional retailer is.
That's a compelling argument regarding their diversification, but I think you're missing that retail, at its absolute core, is about price leadership, and that is where I anchor my position. Walmart is the undisputed master of everyday low cost, EDLC, and everyday low price, EDLP.
We hear those terms a lot, but maybe define them in this context.
Sure. So EDLP isn't just a marketing slogan. It's an operating model that's engineered from inception. It means avoiding the high-low pricing game of running sales and promotions, which, that creates volatility in the supply chain. Instead, you offer the lowest price constantly. And to do that, you need EDLC, everyday low cost. Walmart's advantage is it's structural, not technological. By dominating inbound logistics and procurement, Walmart removes cost from the system faster than any competitor. They pass those savings directly to the consumer, and that creates a trust loop. My argument is that Amazon's ship-to-home model is just economically expensive and inefficient for low-margin goods. Walmart's store density transforms geography into a logistics advantage. They don't just have stores, they have inventory hubs embedded in every community. And that is a moat that software cannot bridge.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on that logistics piece. You're framing ship-to-home as a weakness, but I view Amazon's dominance in outbound logistics as one of the greatest commercial achievements in history.
Commercial history is a big phrase.
I think it's warranted. Look at the value chain. Amazon dominates the customer interface and the outbound layer. We are talking about fulfillment centers, robotics integration, AI routing, and a last-mile delivery network that creates just an unparalleled customer experience. They win on the last mile through pure speed. And when you combine that with the network effects of the marketplace, where third-party sellers add inventory without Amazon taking the risk, you get a flywheel that is incredibly hard to stop.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the last mile is where the war is won, especially when you look at the economics of it. You're praising their outbound logistics, but let's look at the unit economics. Delivering millions of individual parcels directly to households is by definition arguably the most expensive way to move goods.
How so?
Well, think about the packaging alone, the cardboard, the air pillows, the tape. Then think about the vehicle. A van stopping at 150 houses burns more fuel and labor time per unit than a semi-truck dropping 50 pallets at a loading dock. This model, it works for high-margin electronics or fashion where the margin can absorb the shipping cost. But for a tube of toothpaste or a bag of rice, it's a nightmare. You are spending $3 to move a $2 item.
It is expensive, I'll grant you that, but they are optimizing that cost down every single day with robotics. The Kiva systems in their warehouses reduce the pick and pack time drastically, and they're using AI to predict exactly where inventory needs to be before the customer even clicks buy.
But they're fighting gravity. I mean, contrast that with Walmart's dominance of inbound logistics. This is the unsexy part of the business that tech enthusiasts just overlook. Walmart moves massive pallets of goods to central locations, their stores. The customer then spends their own gas and time to perform the last-mile delivery by driving to the store. So when Walmart implements buy online, pickup in store, or curbside pickup, they're leveraging assets that already exist. The inventory is already there. And this drastically lowers the cost per unit compared to Amazon's model.
That's fair. The physical footprint does help the economics of the last mile if the customer does the work. But let's look at the sheer scale of Amazon's network. They have effectively built a private postal service. They aren't reliant on UPS or FedEx as much anymore. That control over the stack allows them to compress delivery times to same day or next day. In a world where time is the ultimate currency, isn't that worth the capital expense?
It's worth it for the premium customer, yes. But for the mass market, I'm skeptical. And this brings us to the real battlefield, grocery. The source material identifies grocery retail as the most strategically important segment because it drives purchase frequency. You buy a TV once every 5 years. You buy bananas every week.
True. If you control the grocery basket, you control the household rhythm.
Absolutely. And this is where my argument for Walmart really solidifies. Amazon has failed to beat Walmart here. They bought Whole Foods, they launched Amazon Fresh, but they still face these structural limits. Perishables and delivery economics are brutal. Spoilage rates, what the industry calls shrink, are much higher when you are trying to pick fresh produce in a warehouse and put it in a van. Walmart remains the largest grocer in the United States, and they use food as a traffic generator. You come in for the cheap bananas, you stay for the flat-screen TV.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes Amazon needs to be the everyday grocery store for everyone. I would frame it differently. Amazon focuses on customer segmentation. Their model appeals to urban and high-income households, where time is more valuable than money.
So they just concede the mass market?
They don't need the whole market. They need the most valuable slice of it. Walmart captures the rural and price-sensitive households, where money is more valuable than time. Amazon's goal isn't to win every single grocery basket. To win the war, they just need to integrate the highest value customers into the Prime ecosystem. If they capture the urban professional who buys organic kale delivered in 2 hours via Whole Foods, well, they've captured the high-margin demographic. That customer then buys their electronics, their clothes, their media from Amazon.
That's a valid point on segmentation. We are seeing a divergence where one firm dominates the consumption logic of budget discipline and the other dominates the logic of convenience. But I want to pivot back to how these companies actually make money, because this is where the Amazon kills Walmart narrative really falls apart.
You mean the profit architecture?
Exactly. We need to talk about how the cash actually flows.
Well, this is the core of my argument. Amazon monetizes ecosystems. As I mentioned earlier, retail is just the portal. When you buy something on Amazon, 3 things often happen. 1, you might be buying from a third-party seller. Amazon takes a fee, usually 15% or more, plus fulfillment fees, without ever owning the inventory. 2, you are likely seeing an ad. Amazon's ad business is now a massive, high-margin juggernaut, profiting from the search volume. And 3, the whole transaction is hosted on AWS.
Right, so they tax the transaction from multiple angles.
Precisely. This makes Amazon incredibly resilient. They can afford to operate retail at thin margins or even at a loss in some categories because AWS and ads provide the financial backbone. It's cross-subsidization at a scale we've just never seen before. It allows them to price aggressively without bleeding out.
See, I view that cross-subsidization as a risk disguised as a strength.
How so? That seems counterintuitive. Diversification is usually good.
It is, but it means their retail business isn't disciplined by its own profitability. Walmart, on the other hand, monetizes operational excellence. Their profit comes from the retail operations themselves. Inventory turnover, scale purchasing, supplier financing. They don't need a cloud computer business to make selling diapers profitable. And there is a specific financial mechanic here we need to unpack, called the cash conversion cycle.
Walk us through that.
The cash conversion cycle measures how fast a company converts cash on hand into inventory and then back into cash. Walmart is a master of this. Because they have such immense scale and inventory turnover, they often sell the product to the consumer before they even have to pay the supplier.
So they're getting paid by the customer on day 1, but paying P&G or Samsung on day 45.
Exactly. This creates negative working capital. They are essentially operating with an interest-free loan from their suppliers. This is the engine of their profitability. It frees up massive amounts of cash flow to reinvest in the business, lower prices further, or buy back stock. This is financial engineering based on physical velocity. Amazon has this too, to an extent, but Walmart's entire existence depends on this efficiency. When you look at the risk disclosures in their filings, it tells the story. Amazon fears fulfillment cost inflation, the burden of speed. Walmart fears margin pressure, the burden of maintaining that price leadership.
That's a deep insight on the working capital. It effectively means Walmart's suppliers are funding Walmart's expansion. But let's look at where the puck is going. You talk about Walmart's mastery of the old model, but they're trying to become more like Amazon.
And Amazon is trying to become more like Walmart.
That's the convergence. Look at Walmart Connect, their media network. They realize that selling goods linearly isn't enough. They need the ad revenue. They're building third-party marketplaces and the Walmart Plus membership to mimic Prime. They're validating Amazon's platform strategy. They're admitting that just selling goods at a low margin isn't enough to satisfy Wall Street anymore.
That is true, but look at the other side. Amazon is buying Whole Foods. They're testing Amazon Fresh stores. They're building locker networks. They're desperately trying to gain proximity. They are validating Walmart's strategy that physical assets matter.
I agree there is convergence, but here is the key disagreement. I believe it is harder for Walmart to replicate the cloud ecosystem and the data culture required to run a digital platform than it is for Amazon to buy physical space. Amazon is a company built on software engineers, Walmart is a company built on merchants, and it is incredibly difficult to change that DNA. Building a high-margin ad network requires a level of data sophistication that is native to Amazon, but frankly, foreign to a traditional retailer.
I come at it from a different way. I think it is infinitely harder for Amazon to build nationwide store density and the intricate supply chain relationships that Walmart has spent 50 years building. We are talking about real estate, zoning laws, construction.
But Amazon has the capital.
Capital isn't the only constraint. Time and geography are constraints. Amazon cannot instantly build a store within 10 miles of 90% of the U.S. population. Walmart already has that. That is a physical asset base that is incredibly difficult to clone. You can't code your way around zoning laws. Walmart can add digital layers, and they are, but Amazon is hitting the hard wall of physical reality.
Yet, Amazon captures the digital lifetime value. They own the search bar. When people want to buy something, 50% or more start their search on Amazon, not Google. That is a stranglehold on intent. If I want a new coffee maker, I don't drive to Walmart to see what they have. I type it into Amazon to read reviews and compare specs. That search intent is the most valuable real estate in the world.
And Walmart owns the weekly wallet share. You might buy the coffee maker on Amazon, but you buy the coffee, the filters, the creamer, and the sugar at Walmart.
Let's look at this moat concept again. You mentioned Walmart's supplier networks. In the source material, it highlights that Walmart's supplier networks and store-based fulfillment give it a defensive moat. But Amazon has a network effect moat. The more sellers they have, the more assortment, the more buyers. Isn't a network effect moat stronger than a physical asset moat in the long run?
In a purely digital world, yes. If we were talking about social media, you'd be right. But we live in a physical world. We eat physical food. We wear physical clothes. The network effect does not lower the cost of shipping a gallon of milk. That's physics. Walmart's moat is that they remove friction from the physical movement of goods better than anyone. And in a high inflation environment or a recessionary environment, that everyday low price moat becomes a fortress. Consumers will trade time for money when budgets get tight. When the economy squeezes, Prime membership is a luxury. Cheap groceries are necessity.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I think the consumer definition of value is shifting. For many, value is, I don't have to leave my house. Amazon monetizes that inertia, and they are using AI and robotics to try and break the physics you're talking about. If they can get the fulfillment cost down through automation, autonomous trucks, drone delivery, dark stores, your physics argument gets weaker.
If. That is a massive, capital-intensive if. Meanwhile, Walmart's is already there. They are profitable on the grocery basket today. Amazon is still trying to figure out how to not lose money on a tomato delivery.
Fair enough. But Amazon doesn't need to make money on the tomato if the tomato buyer subscribes to Prime Video and hosts their startup on AWS. The tomato is a loss leader for a much bigger gain.
And that is the fundamental disconnect. We are comparing a conglomerate that uses retail as a loss leader against a retailer that has perfected the art of, well, retailing.
Let's start to wrap this up, because I think we've arrived at a really nuanced place. We aren't seeing a winner-take-all scenario here.
No, we are seeing a strategic equilibrium.
Exactly. To summarize my position, Amazon's strength lies in differentiation through convenience. They haven't beaten Walmart in groceries, and perhaps they never will, but they have captured the digital consumption economy. They dominate the future architecture of commerce, the cloud, the ads, the subscription bundles. They are playing for the high-margin, high-convenience customer who values time above all else. They are betting that as society gets richer, convenience becomes the primary product.
And to summarize my view, Walmart wins on cost leadership and the everyday consumption economy. The physics of moving physical goods favors the incumbent's asset base. They define where and how often the world buys necessities. As long as price sensitivity exists, and it always will, Walmart's structural moat holds. They aren't going anywhere. They are the bedrock of the physical economy.
So the result is that Amazon captures digital lifetime value, and Walmart captures weekly wallet share.
Precisely. The market doesn't crown a single victor because consumers oscillate. Sometimes you are time poor and cash rich, so you choose Amazon. Other times you are budget conscious, so you choose Walmart.
It really comes down to whether the consumer is optimizing for urgency or for budget at any given moment.
And that is why both giants will continue to coexist. The equilibrium is stable.
A fascinating look at the two most important companies in the global economy. Thank you for listening to the debate. We'll see you next time.